Welcome to Midnight Murmur. Here, the night comes alive with chilling tales and spine-tingling stories. If you crave the thrill of the unknown and the eerie whisper of the supernatural, you've found your new haunt. Join us as we dive into the darkest corners of the human mind, unraveling short horror stories that will keep you up at night. Hit that subscribe button, turn off the lights, and let the murmur begin. The haunting of Ashwood Manor. Ashwood Manor stood on the outskirts of a quiet village in England, a grand estate with a dark history. The manor had been abandoned for over a century, left to decay and be reclaimed by nature. It was said to be cursed, haunted by the vengeful spirit of Lady Eleanor Ashwood, who had mysteriously vanished on her wedding night. Despite the warnings, a group of paranormal researchers, David, Rachel, Tom, and Linda, decided to spend a night in the manor to document its supernatural occurrences. The night they arrived, the manor loomed ominously against the darkening sky, its windows like vacant eyes staring out at them. They pushed open the heavy wooden doors and stepped into the grand foyer, their footsteps echoing in the silence. Dust and cobwebs covered everything, and the air was thick with the scent of rot and decay. "We need to set up our equipment," David said, trying to mask his unease. "Let's start with the main hall." As they arranged their cameras and recording devices, a cold breeze swept through the room, causing the candles they had lit to flicker. Rachel shivered. "Did you feel that? It's like the air just turned icy." Tom nodded, glancing around nervously. "Let's stick together. This place gives me the creeps." They began their investigation, moving from room to room. In the library, they found a portrait of Lady Eleanor, her eyes seeming to follow them as they moved. As they examined the painting, a sudden chill filled the room, and they heard a faint whispering. "Can you hear that?" Linda asked, her voice trembling. "It's coming from the walls," David replied, his eyes wide with fear. The whispering grew louder, more insistent, and the friends felt an oppressive weight pressing down on them. Suddenly, the doors slammed shut, trapping them inside. The room grew darker, and the whispering turned into a sinister chant. "Leave this place," a voice boomed, reverberating through the walls. Panic set in as they tried to open the doors, but they wouldn't budge. The candles were snuffed out, plunging them into complete darkness. In the pitch-black room, they could hear something moving, its footsteps echoing around them. "Who's there?" Rachel called out, her voice shaking. A figure appeared in the darkness, its form barely visible. It was Lady Eleanor, her face twisted in anger and sorrow. She raised her hand, and the temperature plummeted further, their breath visible in the freezing air. "You must leave," she said, her voice filled with malice. "This is my home." David managed to pry open the door, and they bolted out of the library, their hearts pounding in their chests. As they ran down the hallway, the walls seemed to close in on them, the sinister chanting following them. They reached the foyer and rushed to the front door, but it too was locked. Desperate, they searched for another way out, finally finding a small side door. They burst through it and ran into the night, not stopping until they were far from the manor. The next day, they reviewed their footage, but it was all corrupted. The images were distorted, and the audio was filled with static and the ominous chant. They knew what they had experienced was real, and they vowed never to return to Ashwood Manor. The manor remained abandoned, a place of fear and darkness. Lady Eleanor's spirit continued to haunt its halls, her anger and sorrow keeping her tethered to the place where she had met her tragic fate. The village spoke of the manor in hushed tones, warning others to stay away, for those who entered Ashwood Manor rarely came out the same. The Demon of Red Hollow. Red Hollow was a remote village in the deep woods of Oregon, cut off from the modern world and steeped in mystery. The villagers spoke in whispers about a demon that lurked in the woods, a creature that would emerge every few decades to wreak havoc and claim souls. Despite these terrifying tales, a group of hikers, Jason, Megan, Eric, and Anna, decided to explore the area, drawn by the thrill of uncovering the truth. They set up camp on the outskirts of the village, the dense forest pressing in around them. The night was eerily silent, the only sounds the crackling of their campfire and the occasional hoot of an owl. As they shared stories and laughter, they felt a strange unease settle over them, as if they were being watched. "We should be careful," Anna said, her eyes scanning the dark woods. The locals seemed genuinely afraid of something. Jason shrugged it off. "It's just superstition. There's nothing out there." But as the night wore on, they began to hear strange noises, low growls, and rustling in the underbrush. Eric shone his flashlight into the trees, but saw nothing. "Probably just animals," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. Around midnight, the growling grew louder, and a sense of dread filled the air. The firelight flickered, casting long shadows that seemed to move on their own. Suddenly, a blood-curdling scream pierced the night, and the friends jumped to their feet. "What was that?" Megan asked, her voice shaking. Before anyone could answer, the ground beneath them trembled, and a dark figure emerged from the shadows. It was tall and grotesque, with glowing red eyes and sharp, clawed hands. The demon of Red Hollow had come. The friends scattered, running blindly into the woods. Jason and Anna managed to stay together, their breath coming in ragged gasps as they stumbled through the darkness. They could hear the demon's growls and the screams of their friends in the distance. "We have to keep moving," Jason urged, pulling Anna along. They reached an old, abandoned cabin and ducked inside, hoping to find refuge. The cabin was dark and musty, with broken windows and decaying furniture. They barricaded the door and huddled together, trying to catch their breath. "Do you think it will find us?" Anna whispered, her eyes wide with fear. Jason shook his head, but before he could respond, the door shook violently, and the demon's growls filled the cabin. The windows shattered, and the demon's clawed hands reached through, grasping for them. "We have to get out of here," Jason shouted. They fled through the back door, running deeper into the woods. The demon was relentless, its glowing eyes tracking them through the darkness. They stumbled upon an old church, its doors hanging open. Desperate, they ran inside and slammed the doors shut. The church was filled with an eerie silence, the air thick with the scent of incense and decay. Jason found an old, tattered Bible and began reciting prayers, hoping to ward off the demon. The growling outside grew louder, and the doors shook as the demon tried to break in. "Please, let this work," Anna whispered, clutching a wooden cross. The growling stopped, and the air grew still. For a moment, they thought they had succeeded. But then the doors burst open, and the demon stood in the doorway, its eyes burning with rage. "You cannot escape," it hissed, its voice echoing through the church. As the demon advanced, Jason and Anna backed away, their prayers turning to screams. The demon lunged, and the world went dark. The next morning, the villagers found the old church doors wide open and the bodies of Jason and Anna inside, their faces frozen in terror. The demon of Red Hollow had claimed its victims, and the village was once again shrouded in fear. The legend of the demon grew, and the villagers warned all who passed through to stay away from the woods. The evil presence remained, lurking in the shadows, waiting for its next victims. Those who ventured into Red Hollow would never be the same, their souls forever haunted by the demon's curse. The Whispering Shadows. Ravenswood Cemetery was an ancient burial ground on the outskirts of a small town in New Hampshire. It was a place of eerie silence and overgrown graves, shrouded in a perpetual fog. The townspeople avoided it at all costs, believing it to be haunted by malevolent spirits that whispered secrets of the dead to those who dared to enter. Despite the warnings, a group of thrill-seeking college students, Max, Lisa, Brandon, and Chloe, decided to spend a night in the cemetery to debunk the ghost stories. They arrived just before midnight, the full moon casting an eerie glow over the tombstones. "This place is creepy," Chloe said, hugging herself against the chill. "Maybe we should turn back." "Come on, Chloe," Max said with a grin. "It's just a bunch of old graves. There's nothing to be afraid of." They set up their equipment near the center of the cemetery, where a large, ancient mausoleum stood. The stone structure was covered in moss and vines, its iron gate rusted and partially ajar. "Let's split up and explore," Max suggested. "We'll cover more ground that way." Reluctantly, the group agreed. Max and Lisa headed towards the mausoleum, while Brandon and Chloe explored the older part of the cemetery. As they moved through the fog, the air grew colder, and they could hear faint whispering, as if the very ground was speaking to them. Max pushed open the gate of the mausoleum, and they stepped inside. The air was stale and filled with the scent of decay. Their flashlights flickered, casting long shadows on the walls. As they moved deeper into the mausoleum, the whispering grew louder, more insistent. "Can you hear that?" Lisa asked, her voice trembling. Max nodded, his expression serious. "It's like voices, but I can't make out what they're saying." Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind them, plunging them into darkness. Their flashlights flickered and died, leaving them in complete blackness. The whispering grew louder, the voices overlapping and filling their minds with fear. "Max, I don't like this," Lisa said, her voice barely above a whisper. "We need to find a way out," Max replied, his heart pounding in his chest. Meanwhile, Brandon and Chloe were experiencing their own terror. As they walked among the old graves, they felt an oppressive weight pressing down on them. The whispering seemed to come from all around, growing louder with each step. "I think we should go back," Chloe said, her voice shaking. Brandon agreed, but as they turned to leave, they saw a figure standing in the fog, its eyes glowing with an unnatural light. The figure moved towards them, its form shifting and indistinct. "Run!" Brandon shouted, grabbing Chloe's hand. They sprinted through the cemetery, the figure pursuing them with relentless speed. The whispering grew deafening, filling their minds with fear and confusion. They stumbled and fell, their hands scraping against the rough ground. In the mausoleum, Max and Lisa were frantically searching for a way out. They found a narrow passage leading to a hidden chamber, and they squeezed through, hoping it would lead to safety. The chamber was filled with old, dusty relics and the remains of forgotten souls. As they moved through the chamber, they felt a cold presence behind them. They turned to see a shadowy figure, its eyes glowing with malice. The whispering filled their ears, and they felt their strength draining away. "You cannot leave," the figure intoned, its voice a chorus of the dead. Desperate, Max and Lisa tried to push past the figure, but it reached out and touched them, its touch freezing their very souls. They collapsed to the ground, their bodies cold and lifeless. Outside, Brandon and Chloe reached the cemetery gates, gasping for breath. They looked back to see the figure standing at the edge of the fog, its eyes burning with rage. They knew they had to leave before it claimed them too. The next morning, the townspeople found the bodies of Max and Lisa in the mausoleum, their faces twisted in terror. Brandon and Chloe left town, unable to forget the horrors they had witnessed. Ravenswood Cemetery remained a place of fear and darkness, its whispering shadows waiting to claim the souls of those who dared to enter. The legend of the haunted cemetery grew, and the townspeople warned all who passed through to stay away, for the spirits of the dead were restless and hungry for the living.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more chilling content.